It's time for Myth of the Week.
All right. Well, I had a lot of fun doing the myth this week. I think James was probably a little surprised when he saw it because this kind of came out of left field. And like I say, I think this picture is actually kind of funny. Like, I don't know, James, if you'd actually pass something like that, if you
Nope.
saw that out in the field.
Nope.
Looks a little funky. But the myth of the week, number 116, true or false, duct seal can be used as a barrier on energized parts on a service bus bar or service terminals to prevent inadvertent contact by persons maintenance equipment while servicing. The load terminations with the service disconnect in the open position, which would actually mean that the only thing that's going to be hot is those line side terminals. And that would be the reason for the barrier. I thought this was kind of interesting. Like I say, obviously this thing's probably out there working, and it probably didn't blow up or anything. So obviously it actually does work. But if you go in, you actually gonna have UL standard number 67, and I want to give a big shout out to David Englehart for providing technical information on that. Per UL 67, they're required to provide you with line side barriers, and I guess this is pretty much only when you have like in a service entrance situation. And I want to say this is out at like some kind of like RV park or some kind of trailer park type situation. So I guess it was a situation where these service disconnects didn't come with any kind of line side barriers. And from what my understanding is that the inspector allowed him to do that. So the inspector saw that as a adequate solution. And I guess the duct seal is rated at 1,000 volts. And I want to have a big shout out to Justin Gibbs for providing the information on the duct seal. And like I say, it was kind of interesting too when Justin pulled that up. It says not for use in outdoor use, and I almost always see it as outdoor use. I like almost every time I've seen duct seal, it's some type of outdoor installation that we're sealing up or something like that. We do use it from time to time indoors, but I would say that not necessarily outdoor, but a lot of times we use it at freezers and stuff like that. So. It's kind of interesting, but the myth is actually false. You cannot use duct seal and violate the UL standard. The listing and labeling of the equipment does not allow you to use duct seal as an approved method of creating this barrier, regardless if the code does not specifically prohibit it. So I thought it was a pretty interesting one. I got a lot of people's take on it this week, and especially your take, James. I liked your take. I was trying to get you to let me slide on it, but it didn't seem like you're having it.
Well, when you told me last night, I was like, "What's the myth on again?" And I said, and you were telling me, yeah, they you asked on one of somebody's podcast something, and they were trying to look it up. I said, hell, you don't have to look that up. I said, that goes to the listing and labeling of equipment. I said,
Sure.
that's not something that's in the code. All it gets into, and I'm going to show you here in a minute, where it deals with barriers. I said, and as far as the barrier goes, it's if that equipment is listed and labeled for that barrier. I said, you just can't go in and modify equipment and stuff. And I said, duct seal is not a barrier. And
Right.
so we had discussed all of that, and then you had sent over from Justin Gibbs. Look there, Justin, I gave you credit, so don't say I didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
But it goes in and it talks about the compound here, and it has its properties and all that you can look at, and the flash points and all of that. So, I mean, you can go in and look at what it's rated for, but that is not where you really want to look. Where you want to look is in this part here where it talks about uses. And it tells you that the duct sealing compound is used primarily by the building and specifically by the electrical trade to seal around electrical boxes, fittings, and service mass entries. And
True.
as a barrier, okay?
Right.
And this is where you really want to look at. And this goes back to stuff I said before. When they're looking at this and they're giving listing and labelings on there, if they were going to allow you to do that, they would have looked at the code and referenced the code and saying that it could be used that way. And you'll notice it's not in here. So
True, and I know a lot of people. I was trying to kind of play devil's advocate in the chat to kind of because a lot of people say, well, it's not listed for the purpose. But if you look at 230.62C, it doesn't say must be a listed compound. It doesn't say must be a listed barrier. So to my point, you could say, well, does it have to be listed fiberglass? Does it have to be listed metal? That because they actually say metal could be a barrier. They had all these different examples of things that could be a barrier. But at the same time, if that's the case, then those barriers would actually be identified by the manufacturer as suitable for use as that.
Well, they even have an NFPA enhanced content. They go in and they talk about it. You have to work on it while it's energized, and they tell you to refer to the 7E document. And then that second sentence says, barriers provide physical separation. So
True.
in other words, it provides adequate distance or an obstacle between the load terminals and the service bus bar terminals. And that's where I'm getting into this, is because you've got to have something that's in there that is a physical separation. And I don't believe that putting some duct seal on there is exactly what they had in mind when they were looking at a physical separation. Plus, if you're putting a barrier in there that's a physical type barrier for separation, I believe that barrier, you have to have a piece of equipment that's set up that will accept that barrier. If you don't, I think you're breaking the listing and labeling of the equipment, because now you're coming inside that equipment and you're modifying it. Okay? And that's something you don't go in and do to equipment, is modify it. So that would be one that I would look at, and I would say that it has to be listed and labeled for you to put that barrier in there. I don't think you can just go in and put a barrier in there. Now, you can take and have, because they do a lot of this in the oil field, that they'll go in and they can't get certain equipment, and they'll come in and design a piece of equipment and may want to put a barrier in there, and you can be the authority having jurisdiction that takes responsibility of that equipment as approved. Or you can have a third party come in, which they'll do a UL 508 and a 508 shop on this, and then they take and put a field installed label on it saying that the equipment is okay to put that barrier in. So if you have an old piece of equipment, you want them barriers, you can be the facility taking responsibility for it because you modified that equipment, or have a third party come in and give you and look at the equipment and give you a field installed label. Okay?
Yeah, and like if I was gonna do something like that, I would probably